Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to read The Cold Within by James Patrick Kinney. I'll read the poem and then explain you the poem. Listen to it carefully. First, I'm reading the poem. After this, I'm going to say something about James Patrick Kinney. Let me read the poem first. 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. Their dying fire in need of logs, but the first one held her back. For of the faces round the fire, she noticed one was black. The next man, looking across the way, saw one not of his church, and could not bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. The third one sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should his log be put to use to warm the idle rich? The rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store, and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy, shiftless poor. The black man's face bespoke revenge as the fire passed from his sight, for all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. The last man of this fallen group did not accept for gain. Giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. The logs held tight in death's still hands was proof of human sin. They did not die from the cold without, they died from the cold within. So this was the poem. First, let me go with James Patrick Kinney, the poet. See, James Patrick Kinney is an American poet who wrote this poem in 1960s. It was first rejected because it was too controversial, because it was talking about racism, casteism, poor, rich, black, white, Catholics, Protestants. All these things have come up. So there was definitely a sign of rejection in this poem, by the people, because they don't want to go into controversy. But it gained popularity rapidly after it had been read out at a council meeting of all religions. So definitely, all religion meeting is definitely an open space where the views about religion, the segregation of this religion, casteism or racism can be rejected. Okay, so the poem describes the tragic death of a group of 6 people. Now, this is about the poem. 6 people comes together by happenstance. Happenstance means happeningly they come together in a cold night, and they are carrying a log of wood. Each of them were carrying a log of wood. So what happened is that these people gathered fire, made a fire round to keep themselves warm. They were each carrying a piece of wood, a log. But as and when the fire starts dying off, if each one of them kept on feeding the fire with the log of wood, they would have survived. But they didn't do it because they have their prejudices, they have their egos. They kept stuck to it, and they had the reasons for not giving the fire. They wanted to revenge. They wanted to seek vengeance. As a result, what happened? Each of them had their logics of having their vengeance. And what happened? All of them died because they froze to death. So that's where the poet is saying that the fire was there. They had the means to feed the fire. They had their opportunity to save their lives, but they didn't. They didn't even give an effort to it. As a result, what happens? all of them dies. That's pathetic, because these people were selfish. They were too much concentrating on their own gain. The materialistic gain was too much for them, so they didn't want to reciprocate to the call of humanity. As a result, what happened? All of them lose their life. So they froze from the cold within. The cold that was within themselves. Within themselves means the selfishness, the greediness, the desire of being me. They didn't want to give value to the people's lives. They wanted to value their own lives. They had the means of saying that, why should I? That's wrong. And that's where the title of the poem, The Cold Within, lies over here. Okay, so first let me just go with this short summary of this. The poem describes the tragic death of a group of 6 people who stand around a fire, each holding on grimly to a log of wood, allowing their selfishness, prejudice, malice, and suspicions to dictate their actions. They refuse to share the log to fuel the dying fire and keep each other warm. Eventually the fire dies out, and in the morning all 6 of them are found frozen to death, each clutching, even in the death, a log that could have so easily saved their lives if only they had overcome the petty barriers of class, race, and religion that divided them. The poem is a simple yet powerful reminder that if we selfishly hold on to the world's resources and the wealth that it has to offer, if we persist in discriminating on grounds of race, religion, caste, gender, and ethnicity, we are all lost. So that's what the main fact of the poem is. Now let me just go with the paraphrase very quickly, in a very rapid way, so that you understand. It's a very easy poem, but the profoundness of this poem is huge. Okay, the 6 humans trapped by happenstance. See, this is what happenstance, that means by happening, out of happening, instance by happening, in bleak and bitter cold. Bleak, blank, bitter, chilling, cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. So that's how the story has been told, that these people by happenstance come to a place where it was very cold. Okay, so each one of them are possessing a stick of wood. The dying fire in need of logs, but the first one held back for the faces around the fire. She noticed one was black. So the dying fire needs a log. The fire needed a log. They have to input a stick or wood to the fire. But the first one held her back. The first one didn't give her fire. Why? Because she found in this gathering, in one of the faces on the fire, she noticed one was black. This lady noticed that there was a black person, and she didn't want to give the fire to the black. She hated the black. The next man, looking across the way, saw one of his church. The next man who looked on the way found one of the man was from his own church. Not from the church. Was not from the church. And one not could bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. Stick of birch, this birch wood, that gives a good fire. So she found that one of these people was not from the member of his own church. Maybe he's a Catholic, another is a Protestant. Okay, so he didn't want to give the fire to the person who is not belonging to his community. The third one sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. He controlled himself. Coat a hitch. Hitch means the third one sat in tattered clothes. He was poor, tattered, torn with clothes. He was just pulling up the clothes like this. He was crumpling down. Okay. Why should his logs be put to use? Why should he going to give his logs? His log is precious. He can use it for himself. Why should he going to give his logs to the idle rich? The rich to him is idle. They do nothing, but they just order, and the poor people suffer, the poor people work, and the rich people make their money. So that is a crime to the poor people. Okay, so the third one sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should his log be put to use? To warm the idle rich? The rich man sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store. The rich man was idle, like he was pretty happy. He said, why should I'm going to give this my thing to this, use my fire for this people, the poor people, and how to keep what it earned for the lazy, shiftless poor, and for the rich men, the poor people are lazy. They don't want to work. That's why they are poor. That's the logic they have in their mind. So that's what he's saying, that why should I give my fire to these people who are basically lazy? I don't want to give my log of wood to somebody who is basically lazy, spendthrift. Okay, so they just earn and spend away. They don't invest, they don't save the money, they don't work hard enough to earn more money. So the black man's face bespoke revenge. Now the black man who was neglected, his face was full of revenge. Why he was full of revenge? Because they have been hated by the whites. They have been undertreated, mistreated, maltreated by the whites. Okay, so the black man's face bespoke revenge as the fire passed from his side. The fire was passing from his side. For all he knew, all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. Because all he knew that if he gives the fire, he's going to control the white. The last man of this fallen group did not expect except for gain. So the last man in this group did not accept anything but for gain. Giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. He only gave those things to those who played the game. He was a materialist. He was a businessman person who didn't think anything other than his own gain. So he gave only to those from whom he had an interest that he is going to get something in his life. So that's how he wanted to play the game. Okay, their logs held tight in death's still hands. So they all died because they were, till the time of death, they couldn't even make up their mind. They clutched to the wood, they clutched to the log of wood and felt that they will survive without the wood, without the fire. But that's not going to happen. That can never happen. That never happens. Okay, so what happened? These people, they had their egos so profound that they didn't want to release themselves of this ego. And as a result, what happened? All of them had died. All of them were clutching to the wood. They didn't want to give. They were shivering. They were affected internally. Their organs were clotting. Yet they could not make up their mind to give their piece of wood, expecting the other to put up their fire. That's how these people died. They froze to death. Their humanity froze to death. This shows how selfish desires of our human being can lead to the catastrophic end of our lives. Okay, so the logs held tight in death's still hands was proof of human sin. They did not die from the cold without. They died from the cold within. So they didn't die from the cold without, from the outside, the external death, but they died from the cold within. So that's what it is. This is all about the poem. Read the poem, understand it, and we will further proceed with this. Thank you. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.